So Nisha, as a woman and looking at a picture of this dude, thoughts?
Very sexy.
There we go, good. Ah! Different men react in different ways upon being confronted by a superior specimen of manlitude. Some men stand in awe, some men get angry. And if the life of, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, Sessue Hayakawa is anything to be believed, some men just can't fucking deal.
Okay, so I'm guessing this guy was Japanese.
Yeah, and I apologise profusely for my butchered pronunciation of his name. And oddly enough, Hayakawa being Japanese is part of the reason that some people just couldn't handle how handsome he was. And if you're currently thinking, well, how handsome was this man? Here are several pictures demonstrating that fact. And if you don't think that that's one handsome motherfucker, get out of here. Look at him. Look at this man. Oh my God, I feel so bad. I'm so sorry that I'm in this video now. I feel I should just step off camera for a sec. Just so people can appreciate just the man that is like Sessue Hayakawa. Like, God!
Well, I'm just looking at the black and white image of him doing that smolder, and I'm thinking a lot of celebrities do that, and I'm thinking he started it.
He very well might have, because like, damn, those photos are good. And there's just something about the ultra high quality black and white photo of just a guy with an immaculate suit that's just so fucking cool. And it reminds me a lot of those super high quality old-timey mugshots that float around every now and again. Have you seen any of those, and are you familiar with the backstory at all?
I think I might have seen some, but I'm not familiar with the backstory.
Okay, well the backstory was that back in the day, when they took a mugshot of a criminal, what they would do is just let them pose for the camera. So what they do is take a few normal photos, like here's a front-facing one, here's one in profile, here's another one of you stood next to that height chart thingy so we know how tall you are. And then what they do is, for some inexplicable reason, say, okay, now just stand casually and pose for a photo. And what came out of that are some of the most boss-ass looking photos you have ever fucking seen. They look so good.
Wasn't there a photo of a guy who had like the most like piercing blue eyes ever, and he was like...
Yeah, the
really
super sexy mugshot. Yeah. And he became a male model after it because his mugshot, he was just smouldering so much in it. The other one was that there's a similar thing happened with a woman where it was just a photo of a lady and she just looked so good in her mugshot. Everyone's like, the fuck is going on here? How does she look that good on the worst day of her life? It's like, is it How I Met Your Mother? With Barney Stinson, it's like, oh, I never take a bad photo. And they try and take that candid photo of like eating a chip.
Yeah.
And it's like Neil Patrick Harris like, on a chip. And they show you the photo and it's just him like.
Aha! Got it. A bad picture.
Is it though?
It's like, God damn it, Neil Patrick Harris.
That's one of my favourite bits. Yeah, he just looks flawless in every photo. It's amazing.
He never takes a bad photo. It's like, for fuck's sake, I'm so envious of people who take good photos. Like, do you ever see the one of like the ridiculously photogenic running man?
No, I don't.
And it's just a guy going for a jog, and he looks at the camera dead on and does a big smile. And he looks immaculate. It looks like a fucking stock photo. And then there was another one, and it was ridiculously photogenic judo man. And it's one of a guy who's midway through being hurled in a judo competition. But at the exact moment the person took the photo, he looks over and smiles. So it looks like he's just like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, fuck, so good.
Even when I try to look good in a photo, I still probably look worse than most people that are just not trying at all.
Yeah, these candid photos. And like Sessue Hayakawa was one of those men where just being himself and wandering around, people like commented on how handsome he was, which is how he ended up getting into acting in the first place. Because the story goes that he originally travelled to the United States from Japan to pursue, I believe it was a business degree or something like that. And he took part in a few plays for fun. And his smouldering good looks combined with his natural charisma. So being approached by someone putting on a play, he was like, do you want to headline our show? So what he did is he told the guy, I'll be in your show for $500 a week, which at the time was the equivalent of like $10 grand a week for a completely unknown actor. And he thought by asking for such a ridiculous price for his services, the guy would say no and he'd be able to turn down the role that way. And to his surprise, the guy was like, well, yeah, sure, I'll pay you that. And Hayakawa was like, all right, fine, baller. I'll earn $5 grand a week for being in a play. And that's how his acting career started. A similar story from more modern times is Mel Gibson, because that's reportedly how he got the role of Mad Max in the film Mad Max. And the story goes he got into a bar fight the night before his audition and just had his face all fucked up like bruises, bleeding and stuff. And he turned up for the audition and they cast him as one of the people in the background. And when he turned up a few days later for filming and his wounds had healed, they realised how handsome he was and made him the star.
We've established this guy is super, super attractive.
Yes.
So what's the deal with him?
Well, the problem is that the apex of Hayakawa's career coincided with the rise of anti-Japanese sentiments among the American populace, which you think would be a career killer for a Japanese man, but Hayakawa had something on his side, and that something was himself. Like, look at him! Look at the man!
So being handsome is one thing, but what made him like so bankable, you know, despite everything that was happening?
It's because white women fucking loved Sessue Hayakawa. And as an example of how popular Hayakawa was with white women, it's noted that you could not hear the dialogue of movies he appeared in because every time he appeared on screen, the entire audience, which was usually entirely full of women, would scream every time he was on screen, which ended up being kind of an issue for movie studios.
So what do you mean it became an issue for like movie studios?
Well, because of the horribly backwards and racist thinking of the time, despite Hayakawa being literally the most bankable, fuckable leading man in Hollywood, movie studios couldn't cast him in a role where he actually got the girl. Yeah, so just think about that for a moment.
Okay.
Millions of women want to fuck this dude. All of his films are filled with screaming fans. He received thousands upon thousands of letters of adoration from women. And yet he can't get the girl in the movies because it might upset a racist. Which put movie studios in a really weird, paradoxical situation where they couldn't cast the sexiest man in Hollywood, a man every woman wanted to fuck, in the role where he got to fuck the woman because racists might not like it, which resulted in Hayakawa being typecast as a forbidden lover. So he's the villain that the women are attracted to, but then the white man comes in and saves the day and the woman gets with him. And I should point out that audiences didn't really like this because they wanted the woman to get with Hayakawa.
How is he playing the villain supposed to make him like less hot? I mean, you get a lot like in today's films. Villains are sexy.
The villain's always hotter. It's so good. It made some of the screenings super awkward given the more prudish sensibility of the time. And it's noted that male executives got super fucking uncomfortable when they watched the scenes of Hayakawa supposedly being a villain and women were just losing their shit over it. For example, for the film The Cheat, in which Hayakawa played a domineering, brooding foreigner who coerces a woman into having sex with him for $10,000, which the woman doesn't follow through on because she's chaste and she's saving herself for the white hero. He then goes to brand her with a hot iron, which women watching found super fucking hot. And it made everyone super uncomfortable because he's supposed to be a villain. He's supposed to be doing a bad thing. It's like, oh, look at him punishing this woman for being bad. And all the women in the audience are like, yeah, Hayakawa, fucking do it. And it reminds me a lot of like when 50 Shades of Grey came out.
Oh no.
And you had people criticise, oh man, women don't really want that. And every woman in the audience is like, fucking do it. Whip that bitch, you Sean Christian Grey. And we can't not mention 50 Shades of Grey without talking about that amazing news report where they're talking about, man, this is one of the biggest films ever. Loads of women are flocking to see it. And while they're talking about it, there's a guy on his own leaving the cinema and realises he's on camera and that he's just being pictured coming out of 50 Shades of Grey on his own.
Til at gå for at give hende det, hun vil have. For det kan godt være, at han har sin måde at have sit seksuelle liv på.
And if I'm remembering correctly, didn't Brad work in a cinema where 50 Shades of Grey was screening? If I'm remembering correctly as well, he had a few stories about it. So, Brad, if you end up editing this one, or if Nisha, you do, you want to contact him, put a fat bar below if there's any funny anecdotes he has about that film.
So obviously, women love this guy.
They did, yes, understandably.
What about everybody else?
Well, here's the weird thing, like, Hayakawa was consistently very popular with virtually everybody except horrible racists. And his peers and the people he acted alongside had nothing but good things to say about him, praising him for his warm, affable personality and professionalism. He was also noted as being very well liked in Hollywood due to his habit of throwing outrageous, lavish parties full of alcohol, even during Prohibition, because he had the foresight to buy about 10,000 bottles of liquor before Prohibition started, so he could continue doing this. And as you might expect, newspapers like to cover these extravagant parties in great detail, which the general public just ate the fuck up because the stories about him were so hilariously awesome. For example, one of the first things he did when he got to be a big star was buy a giant castle mansion. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, he literally bought a giant mansion shaped like a castle. And as if living in a castle full of alcohol wasn't cool enough, he also drove around in, I shit you not, a gold-plated supercar.
Wow.
So he bought a supercar and had it plated in gold. Just because he could. He also gambled away massive fortunes on a whim, smoked and drank with the best of them, and could frequently be pictured walking around Hollywood with a giant cigar clamped between his teeth and 2 white women on each arm before he settled down and got married. And people love that shit. People are like, what a baller! What a fucking baller! It reminds me a bit of the boxer Jack Johnson, who fought in a time where people were super, super racist, so much like today. One of the most famous stories about him is that he was once caught speeding. When the police officer said, I'm going to have to give you a $50 fine, which was a massive amount at the time, Jack Johnson gave him a $100 bill and said, keep the change, because I'm going to go the same speed on the way back. It was like, fucking baller.
So yeah, I think the end question everybody wants to know the answer to is, did Hayakawa end up having sex with a white woman?
In a film.
Yeah.
Probably had it in his life, but in a film, no. And one of his biggest dreams, according to people who knew him, was to play a heroic Japanese character in a movie to show people that Japanese people can be heroic too. And he never got to do that because World War II happened and kind of put his career on hold. And as if everything I've told you about Hayakawa didn't make him sound like enough of a badass baller, during World War II he went over to Europe and helped the French resistance, so he helped fight in World War II as well, despite the fact everyone was being a massive dick to him. And he made a somewhat successful return to acting after that, and I think his most famous role was Brige over the River Kwai, where he plays a dickhead Japanese prison camp officer, so not exactly the heroic Japanese character he wanted to play, and then he became a Buddhist monk. So sadly, he never did get to play a heroic Japanese character in a film. Thankfully, though, he was a heroic Japanese guy in real life, so fuck it. I guess that works out. So we've covered a few stories like this on the channel before, and they never cease to annoy the shit out of me, because as we covered in this video, Hayakawa was loved by pretty much everybody except for racists, and movie studios decided, oh man, I guess we better pander to the racists. He had millions of women screaming his name. He was one of those bankable, highest paid film stars of his age.
Yeah.
And almost no one knows anything about him today. And it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, he fought for the Allies. He helped win World War II. And that's his most famous role. So what a dick fucking move. So we talked about Star Trek and the famous interracial kiss between Kirk and Uhura. And this TV studio didn't want to air it because they didn't want to upset racists. It's like, oh, come on. It's like,
For God's sake. Fuck them.
And it makes it so bad as well, because like Hayakawa was, by all accounts, a super fucking awesome baller dude. And I wish we could tell more stories about his life, but he didn't get to live the life that would allow us to tell those stories because just people were dicks back then.
But yeah, they say they just stuck him in a film as a villain, thinking, oh yeah, he'll be less sexy.
That makes him hotter, man.
The
villain's always hotter, especially when they look like
sexy.
Hayakawa did. That's one of those things where it was an awful thing to happen, but there's that amusing side effect of they tried so hard to put women off him, and all it did is make them want him more. But you can't get the woman, so let's just make him a villain. Let's make him a villain who punishes the woman for not having sex with him, and it's like women love it. It's like what? Yeah. Did they see the part where he threatened to brand the woman with a hot iron? Like, yeah, like that.
So sexy.
Yeah, people loved it. Honest to God, making us put wet floor signs down in these cinemas is ridiculous. And it's like, oh.
You know the live action version of Beauty and the Beast, how like
yes,
everyone was disappointed when the Beast turned into a human, and they said the Beast looked more handsome. Well, I think
that poor actor though.
The guy who played Gaston, so the villain, was sexier than anyone in that film.
Oh, he's a super attractive dude. Oh man,
Yeah.
like, he's so bad when they do that. And that's what would always happen in Hayakawa movies, where he would be the far more interesting, more attractive option for the female love interest, and then they just bring in some fucking boring ass white dude. It's like, God damn it.